Hello and welcome to Never Seen It Film Club, where we discuss films that you've never seen and we watch them occasionally. I'm Accidental's Emma Bainbridge, and joining me today is Robert J. Simpson, director of Cinepunkt. And we're here for a very special Christmas edition of You've Never Seen It, which is our discussion show that we hold here once a month. And this month we're talking about In Bruges, which I think everyone can agree is the world's best Christmas movie. Because I picked it.
1, 2, 3, go!
Ray, you're about the worst tourist in the whole world. If I'd grown up on a farm and was retarded, Bruges might impress me, but I didn't, so it doesn't.
She ain't my girlfriend. She's a prostitute.
I'm not aware of any prostitutes in Bruges.
Just have to look in the right places. Brothels are good.
An Uzi? I'm not from South Central Los Angeles. I want a normal gun for a normal person.
Maybe that's what hell is. The entire rest of eternity spent in Bruges.
Back off, shorty.
You don't know karate. Ah!
Before we get to that, how are you today, Robert?
Mate, I'm okay. I'm feeling vaguely festive, having spent much of the last couple of weeks dressed as Santa Claus.
Yeah, I would highly recommend checking out Alvard Productions on Instagram.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Have productions. Yes, we do all kinds of theatrical things. That's one of my other hats that I wear.
Santa hats.
Santa hats.
But you can see some very lovely festive photos that I would highly recommend to cheer you up. Which are great. Sadly, this is as festive as I get, and in fact, that's gone. I'm sorry. The mullet must be free. The mullet must be free, because if the mullet's not free, then how will people know that it exists? It's an ancient proverb from a time gone by.
I don't even want to start considering this one. It's too much for me.
It's too much, Emma, and it's too much for everybody, including myself. But anyway, so you've been busy being Santa's helper.
Yes, for any children watching, yes, I'm definitely Santa's helper.
Oh my God! I know him.
And I've been kind of catching up on lots of Christmas viewing, so I feel quite. This is about as festive as I'm going to get, because I also get quite depressed at Christmas, and I'm trying to avoid all my friends and family as best as possible on the actual weekend of it. So thank you very much for giving me one more excuse to kind of pretend to be the reformed Ebenezer Scrooge rather than the pre-Reformation Ebenezer Scrooge, which is how I generally feel.
It's a miracle. It's really a sort of a miracle.
Now I can watch Scrooge with little Robert faces glued to the screen, and then I can imagine that I am the little tiny Tim to your Scrooge and trying to help you come out of the darkness of your Christmas funk.
Yeah, I'd love to do a version of Christmas Carol that plays in reverse.
Yeah, that would be where it just ends with me being like, "Hey, you hate Christmas anyway? How about film about some assassins? That's nothing to do with Christmas. That I'm going to make everyone watch in December as part of the film club."
So why did we pick this?
I'll tell you for why. I spent a lot of time working in cinemas where we showed the same 5 films on a loop for the month of December.
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas!
Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas.
God bless us.
Everyone.
And it drove me absolutely crazy.
Humbug.
So, I did not want to be a part of the conspiracy theory that is every Christmas film has to give you the warm fuzzies, or that a film, and then also on the verse of that, I am of the opinion that just because a film has Christmas in it or doesn't have Christmas in it, why can't it be a Christmas film? If it's something that is good, that you enjoy watching over the holidays, or set in the Yuletide season, why can't you watch that at Christmas and say it's a Christmas film? Why are we showing the same tat over and over again?
This is Christmas!
But I wanted to do a film that had like a vague sprinkling of winter and kind of the feeling of cold and like being outside, and without being a Christmas film. And In Bruges sprang to mind because it's been a while since I've seen it, and truthfully, Banshees of Inisherin came out, and I was like, oh, what's another good film with oh, that's pretty good. But I enjoyed it, and I want it again because it's never seen it at film club. Everyone I spoke to in the office was like, oh, I've never seen that.
I'd never seen it.
So I thought it would be a good shout to give someone a dark, pitch black comedy to watch that you can be like, well, technically it is a Christmas film because it's in the winter and there's like Christmas sprinklings in there. So leave me alone. So that's why.
That's fair enough. I mean, I can't fault the reasoning in terms of like it's a Christmas film in as much as it is set during the Christmas period, and they make reference to that. And quite honestly, I'm quite happy to watch a Christmas film that doesn't have obligatory snow because Northern Ireland, where we live, very seldom actually has snow at Christmas. So when I talk about Christmases I used to know, it's like, well, like this, kind of grey and dank and miserable, but it's fine. There's some sparkly lights, it's great. There is a little bit of a family kind of element to the film. I mean, family actually is quite important, and children are quite important in the film, which again is something that's very Christmassy, although perhaps not in the way that one might expect in this one. So that's okay. But with the comparison to Die Hard is quite pertinent because, like Die Hard, this was not released initially in screens at Christmas time. This was April. Die Hard came out in the middle of the summer as a summer blockbuster. So even with that Christmas trappings, they were not targeted at a contemporary Christmas audience. So that kind of puts it in this weird kind of space. So I mean, for me, Die Hard has become a Christmas film because people like to watch it, and it's that tradition. You know, you watch them oftentimes.
Die Hard is not a Christmas movie.
Like for me, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars are Christmas films.
Yes.
Because that's when I watched them. Was at Christmas.
It's the only time you had enough time to watch them was at Christmas because you had some like time off to be able to go, right, what are we watching? Oh, let's watch the 3-hour director's cut edit of...
Well, it's more than that with those specifically. Star Wars, I remember being on TV at Christmas as a kid, and that's how I first got exposed to that. Lord of the Rings, those films, and the Hobbit trilogy were all released in November, December. They were aimed at that Christmas cinema-going market. So again, actually, a lot of the Star Wars films recently have been issued out in December. So they kind of feel... So, it's more complicated than just about Christmas settings completely, and I think the Christmas element of In Bruges is probably one of the least interesting aspects of it.
Absolutely. I think when I think of In Bruges, to me, it's a story about being in purgatory. Yeah. It's about being in a limbo. It's about, and for me, that's kind of what the Christmas period is. Like, you can't, like, nowadays, like, I feel like 1,000 years old, but nowadays, kids, it's not as bad. But, like, when I was growing up, there was the week before, like, from Christmas Eve until probably New Year's Eve, everything was kind of in this weird, altered state because shops weren't open at the same time. Your parents were usually vaguely around. You know, there's like weird things on television that you'd never it almost felt like you were entering into like a weird alternative universe for a week. And this kind of suspended animation of like people always saying like, oh, we can't do that because it's Christmas. I'm like, why? It's still, time exists. We can still do it, but oh no, it's Christmas. And that's kind of what I love about In Bruges is that kind of, it's like this suspension in the reality for these characters. Like they're in this weird place. They're not. They have no kind of goal. There's nothing that they're like working towards. Like they're supposedly waiting for a hit. But I'm like, it's this thing that will never come, and that's kind of to me is what Christmas as an adult is like, where you just have to wait until it's all over, and then you get to relive continue with the rest of your life. Kind of an idea.
Yeah, I guess it's like, I mean, Colin Farrell's Ray references how shit Bruges actually is a place to go. Because, there's some stuff that's open, except when you can't get into it. There's not an awful lot to do. It's not that interesting. And actually, the most interesting thing about the whole thing for him is whenever they come smack bang in the middle of a film set.
Yep.
So film is our release from the Christmas drudgery, I guess.
There you go.
I'm going with your kind of sentimentality about this. I mean,
I've converted someone else about it. But like to me, Harry is like that mum who gets you a present that she expects you to absolutely love, and then is really pissed off when you didn't ask for it, didn't remotely show an interest in it, but then weren't grateful for it, and then that's annoyed and ruined her Christmas. She's like, because he's almost like, here's this beautiful like ending to your, look where I'm sending you for the last week of your life. It's a fairy tale city.
It's a fairy tale fucking town, isn't it? How can a fairy tale town not be somebody's fucking thing? How can all those canals and bridges and cobble streets and those churches and all that beautiful fucking fairy tale stuff, how can that not be somebody's fucking thing?
And then like Ray's just like a grumpy teenager who's like, I did not want these socks, never said I wanted socks, I don't even like this band, what are you talking to me about, Mum?
You're about the worst tourist in the whole world. If I'd grown up on a farm and was retarded, Bruges might impress me, but I didn't, so it doesn't.
Basically, it's just the dad who's like, yes, dear, no, dear. 3 bags full, dear. And then until the end where he's like, you've gone too far about the socks. He didn't want them, it's okay. Let it go. So yeah, fighting, bloodshed, all the things Christmas is about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to go with you on the analogy. It definitely is there. The idea about the presents is perfectly solid. Yeah, I mean, he's reminiscing. I mean, Ray finds as Harry is reminiscing about a childhood that he remembers and how great it was, which again is like an adult trying to recapture the spirit of Christmas for their children. And you're singing all those carols and songs that reference back to things that never actually happened, but we like to pretend that they did. Because even when he gets there, he seems a little bit disconnected from the memory and the experience of it in a way. Yeah, this is not the path I thought this was going to go
sorry,
down.
I've completely derailed everything with my weird thought. But that's, again, these kind of things, I think choosing In Bruges for our December Christmas film gives you a little insight into how my brain works, where I was like, oh, it's the perfect Christmas film. It's a perfect analogy for like, blah, 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 blah. And then people go, Emma, are you okay? Do you need to talk to us about your family life? Are you sure you're fine? I'm like, yes. That's okay.
You have got a therapist, right?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Hi, Stanley.
What if we take this film outside the context of Christmas and look at it within a wider kind of film perspective? Now, I've just seen Banshees of Inisherin on its release about a month ago. And for me, like, I had no idea. I'd never seen In Bruges, so I hadn't connected it with this. I hadn't appreciated it's the same... It's both Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell starring, and I hadn't appreciated that it was Art McDonough. It's his most recent film and his first film, so it's that kind of reuniting. It does feel like the two echo each other very well. I don't know if you've seen...
Very, like, within the universe, I think, of each other.
Yeah.
Like, I think you mentioned when we had a very brief pre-show discussion, like, they feel related.
If you told me that the characters in Banshees were the grandchildren... were the grandparents of the ones in Bruges, I'd totally buy it. It's like a kind of Blackadder-esque kind of hereditary characters. I mean, that's definitely how it feels for me. Or, back in the day, the Frankie Hard's Lurkio kind of popping up in the various up Pompeii kind of parodies. They also set them in the First World War and during the medieval ages and stuff. So, I mean, that idea of kind of having a character kind of revisited is not new, but that's what it feels like. They feel very much in simpatico. They're equally bleak.
Yeah.
Slightly differently. I mean, the outcome is slightly different. But they are both bleak films with this kind of dark black humor laced throughout it. I mean, I was kind of like looking on Google earlier, and it's like one of those questions that comes up when you start typing in is In Bruges a comedy? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's funny, but I don't know if I'd describe it as a comedy.
Yeah, define comedy, because if it's like divine comedy, maybe no. I like to think of it as In Bruges as like just I like it doesn't have a genre that like outside of good film for me, like because it has it like if you describe it as a black comedy, I don't think you do the tone like the undertones and some of the more like there's real beauty in the characters. I don't think you do them justice by describing it as that. But if you go, oh, it's just, you can't describe it as a straight film either because it's like so funny at really down at like that moment right at the end.
Yeah.
Like with the gun breaking, you're like, that shouldn't be hilarious, but it is. Like you find yourself laughing in the midst of this tragic moment.
It's tragic comedy, which is it's
great.
a thing.
It's very Shakespearean. In that way.
Well, it is. I mean, it's not even like a typical gangster film. It's not a typical heist film. It's not, any kind of assassin film, although it has elements of all these things in it. I mean, I think for me, I mean, spoilerific, but there's a point where they kind of start towards the end of the film. There's a sequence where they re-encounter the film set, and it's like described like a dream set. You know, it's like a fairy tale. It's a dream. I mean, for me, it suddenly dips into Terry Gilliam territory at that point, which I think has kind of been laced through it, probably because we've got you know, a dwarf within the cast. A dwarf who is variously referred to as a midget, but there's also echoes of Don't Look Now and the homunculus within that.
What I like about those moments as well, though, is that it's a film that references that. It's like, oh, it's like this, and then it almost, because they are very forthright about mentioning that triggers those memories in your brain, and then you're watching that with that in mind, and then it makes it even darker and more horrific in some like moments, because that end sequence, if you clipped that out and showed it, that classic film studies trope, take a scene and show it to an audience that's never seen it before without the sound on and see what they think about it, they would probably say, oh, that's from a horror film, or it's from a horrible trace film. So not from this black comedy about two Irish guys in Bruges.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. I think what I find about that scene in particular really nicely is that it mirrors the gallery scene with the rich tapestry of the paintings. And it's this gorgeous, like showing imagery of Jesus over all these ruling over these demons and like punishing sinners and this kind of thing. The color palette and the kind of imagery then is threaded through, and it's just beautiful. And again, I think I talk about cinematography a lot in here, and I apologize if that's not what you signed up for. But for me, because film is such a visual medium, I think it's one of the things that I think about a lot because I find it really important. It gets overlooked as a glorified, as a glory hunting job, but I'm like, the richness of the color palette in those end scenes is just so lovely and yet horrible.
I mean, I don't think it should be massively surprising because the two films that it overtly cites are Orson Welles' Touch of Evil and Nick Rogue's Don't Look Now. I mean, both those happen to be two of my favourite films ever.
Yep.
They're films that at any point we've talked about quite a lot over the years. I'm quite happy that we've actually had an excuse to kind of talk about this for accidental. I mean, those are both very, very keen cinematographed films.
Yep.
I mean, the particular bit in Touch of Evil is famous if you've not seen it for its opening sequence, which as Wells had originally planned it and shot. It was all one take, going through the streets on the Mexico border and kind of leading up to an explosion, which again is quite, I think, kind of appropriate. Nick Rogue started off his life as a cinematographer. He was a cinematographer long before he ever did anything else. We've talked about him on Cinepunk with things like Fahrenheit 451, which he shot. He did some stuff with Roger Corman, and then Don't Look Now is kind of his... I mean, it's a masterpiece in filmmaking, but all his cinematographic eye comes through into the film itself, the way he shoots. And I mean, this film clearly owes huge debt to its structure, to its form, to its stylistic, even that kind of fantasy dreamlike moment before the end, the way that the death of the child features at the start of the film and the way that that's played out and how it kind of prefigures what comes on. I think we talked briefly before we started recording about foreshadowing within the film, and when you realize that's there, I mean, I think sometimes when you're watching it through the first time, you don't spot the obvious foreshadowing that comes. Once you've seen it and you know that's there, when you rewatch it, it's like, oh my gosh, we've literally been led here right from the word go. So that's kind of interesting for me, but there is something about that. I mean, that choosing those kind of directors, saying that I'm a fan of these, it's not often you get a piece of work that literally says, look, do you know what? I'm going to be honest. These are the films that I'm thinking about while I'm kind of making this film. Yeah.
I think what's interesting about Mark McDonagh as well is that his background in theatre, and obviously he's upset, like, theatre people, we tend to be obsessed with storytelling and from a character perspective rather than plot-driven narratives, because you can set a play within a character themselves. People don't terribly want to see a film that way. I disagree. I think character-driven films are excellent and can be doing very well. But I think what's nice about that is his honesty of coming from a character background, writing this almost, because I feel like there's like dialogues and things that you can go, that feels like it should be a scene in a play, but with the eye and the guidance of his favorite films. And I think that's what makes it such a lovely package altogether, is that his vision for like from theater combined with his love of these amazing films, and like going, I want to do something like that, and directly influenced by that and be honest about it, frees him up to be like, yeah, of course I was influenced by this. Because I hate that thing where directors kind of pretend that they had no idea this other thing existed that's really famous and doesn't think. Not saying anything Spielberg. Anyway, but his honesty about it really kind of puts you on, I think, on side with the vision of the film and the journey it takes you on, puts you on, like, you're not fighting against it, being like, well, this is just a rip-off of this. You're like, oh no, it directly references it. And the director's aware that it's a direct reference. And, oh, isn't that lovely? And I just think for a first, like, if this was my first feature as a writer-director, I'd retire. But then he's come back with 7 Psychopaths and then Banshees. And it's like, what is this man doing? Craziness.
I mean, he's clearly...
Heckin' talented man.
Yeah, very definitely. A master of all the things, and you know, is obviously learning. I mean, I think In Bruges feels like quite an intimate film, which again is probably that theatre background. I mean, even even to watch like Banshees, I mean, it's still quite intimate, but it feels much bigger. There's much more about the landscape. The distances seem stronger. This is something that's very definitely like this interplay between a couple of characters, and even when there's these exchanges that bring other people into the mix, again, it's all very tight. It's almost a sense of claustrophobia.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, heck, you know, we got a hotel room, it's a twin, you know, like we can't even escape each other, you know, I can hear you peeing. It's stuff that plays within this tiny space. When Brendan Gleeson's on, when he's on the phone to Ray Fiennes, his character, you know, again, it's within the confines of that bedroom. We're not flipping back and forward.
Yeah.
We see a glimpse of the family that Ken has, or sorry, that Harry has, you know, and again, it's within that kind of small, intimate space. And that's, I don't know, I guess that allows us to kind of feel a bit more. But, I mean, you actually find yourself caring about our protagonists.
Absolutely. And what I find really refreshing about In Bruges is these are not good guys. They're not, like, they have very dubious moral compasses, but they stick to their moral compasses within they have their own rules with it and morality within themselves. But they also don't feel grossly toxic, horrible. Like they feel like they have depth. They feel like you could have a conversation with them. Like there's some, like Ray has some amazing like little snippets of wisdom where he says, you know, there's a part where he's sitting on the bench and he's like, you know, I'm not in the world. You know, I'm sitting here, but I'm not here in Bruges. And like people laugh, and I'm like, you don't get it. He's like, he's so out of his skin because of this horrible thing that's happened that he's caused, and he's very aware of the consequences of his actions beyond himself. It's not like, oh, I've made a mistake and I'm going to get punished for it. It's like, I've made a mistake, and that's going to influence the world around me to the point where I don't know how much damage I've done. And then you've got Brendan Gleeson as just this heartbreaking, like very steadfast and loyal person forced with a choice at the end of it to be like, his loyalty's not to Ray, and we know that. His loyalty is always to Harry, and it's very well explained why he's so loyal to Harry. You know, he's in his debt as he sees it, and he's not he doesn't waver from that in his own sense of morality. He's like, I'm here to, but he has to let Ray go in order to finalize that relationship and just go, you know, I'll take the consequences of my actions of betraying you. It's not your fault. I did the thing. And then you've got Harry, who is arguably the scariest character in terms of how steadfast he is in his morality. But again, he sticks to his own code, so you can't not feel for him either, because like right at the end, he very clearly gives the speech of, if I'd have killed a kid, I'd have put a gun to my mouth and kill. And he doesn't kill a kid, spoiler alert, but he thinks he has. And in that instance, he goes, you know what? That's my That's my code. Have to do it.
Ah. I see.
Oh, no. It's not.
You've got to stick to your principles.
So they feel very human in that way.
I mean, yes and no. I would say yes, they do feel very human. I mean, you've made two hitmen
Yeah.
very likable, understandable characters that you warm to, even though you know that Ray has killed a child. I mean, you know this from very early on. You still feel sympathy and empathy for him. You care about what happens to him, and you kind of look for a possible redemption because he himself is kind of looking to redeem himself.
Yeah.
Where I think I maybe don't agree is that it's rare, I think, in the real world to find somebody who's prepared to stick by the morality and the rules that they set out quite so strongly. I mean, I'm thinking particularly, again, based because of where we are and our kind of wonderful religious background, that, you know, there's a lot of people who within church circles will talk about, people who are very openly religious, who will talk about morality, who will sit there and tell other people about what they should be doing, how they got to do it, and how this is going to be played off. But when something happens, and we see this kind of played out in a lot of other films, is that, you know, whenever something happens that kind of questions their moral fiber and their belief system, they're not willing to kind of follow it through. And I think most people probably wouldn't be prepared to follow that through. They go, okay, right, do you know what? I did this. I now have understanding for why maybe they should have got off with it. I don't think they're likely to. I mean, killing a child is such a monumental thing that I think that's probably is going to haunt you. But to have those set of rules, I think a lot of people will be looking for the get out at that point. I think that Harry is a rare exception because he's got his own family. Yeah. He's got people that he has to look after. He's in charge of the organization. There's no kind of consequence. There's not even, whenever that denouement kind of happens, there's not even a moment where he gets on the phone to tell his colleagues, clearly the people that work for him and with him, that, do you know what, lads, the organization is now going to have to change. Because if you're a crime boss of any kind, you have to let them know.
You have to know who's next in charge, who's in line. And you're like, oh, Big Tony.
There are consequences. It's the whole Austin Powers thing, you know, when someone dies, you know, because they're run over by a steamroller, there's a whole bunch of people that are impacted. So you want to have that set up.
Yes, this is Mrs. Harlan. Yes, my husband is the henchman in Dr. Evil's private army. What?
And that doesn't happen in this.
No.
He literally sees the consequences of his actions and instantly resolves to address it. He doesn't give himself the luxury of a week in Bruges. He's been there for a couple of hours, so maybe Bruges is actually as depressingly shit as Ray thinks it is to begin with.
It's a fairy tale fucking town.
And therefore, you know what, a couple of hours wandering around those cobbled streets is all you need, and then you want to top yourself. Yeah.
It's not a fairy tale city for nothing.
No.
Well, apparently not for anyone in Bruges. But I think what is, again, I keep harkening back, but it's got such religious overtones for me. Like, it does feel like it's purgatory. It feels like the whole film is purgatory, but then the judgment is right at the end. And then we, as the audience, are left with ambiguity.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, I am not a big fan of, like, sewn up endings. I like, they exist. It's fine. Most films have them, and that's grand. What I should say is I'm a big fan of ambiguity when it's relevant and when it's like a good ambiguity, not we ran out of funding, can't do another film ambiguity, not nothing in particular. But I love the fact that even the verbiage, like he says, I hoped I wouldn't die. So you're like, that's a weird way to put that. That's a weird way to phrase that if you weren't already dead.
Is that? But then we wouldn't be hearing his narrative if he was dead. I don't think, because it's a narrative about what had happened.
But then But then are we hearing a reliable narrator who's alive, or are we hearing an unreliable narrator, or a reliable narrator who's recounting what you could do as future as an angel?
I'm pretty sure he's alive.
He shows up in Seven Psychopaths and becomes a writer.
Yeah, I don't think he's dead at the end of the film. I think it'd be different if we had a Don't Look Now situation.
Yeah.
Where it's clearly taken from Donald Sutherland's character's perspective, but he very clearly. I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil Don't Look Now for you. He very clearly meets a tragic end.
Yeah.
That is signposted from where it go, but there's no narrative over the top of it, so we can accept that as a final ending. The difference with this is that because there's a narrative over the top, and actually the original script did have him surviving.
Yeah.
So I think he very definitely survives. But also it's like, when you've kind of gone through the experience and you talk about how you felt in the moment. I mean, he's talking about how he felt in that moment. It also suggests that perhaps the feelings of wanting to kill himself have come back again. In that moment, he didn't want to die.
Yeah.
We've already seen him at a point with a gun to his own head. So he did want to die. And I think afterwards, he probably goes back to that place of, do you know what? I killed a child. I want to die.
Yeah.
I think it's a moment where he is talking about how he felt at that time going through everything that he was going through. I don't think that's a steady thing. But also I think his emotional situation is complex. I mean, in terms of closure, real life doesn't always present us with closure. I mean, that's why, we go to therapists, because we're looking for an answer that we often don't get.
Yeah, it's true. Like, closure is not... Final closure, I don't think you can actually get... I'm of the opinion that closure is not a real thing. But that's just the way my brain works. Even if I have a defined answer, I'm like, but what if this thing... So what I really liked about the kind of ambiguity of the ending was that, we see Harry has met his end, we see Ray meet his end very violently, very grossly. There's a lot of heads blown off in this, so like if you like heads, just don't watch In Bruges. But then Ray's kind of on a stretcher, looking kind of still human. So like it's like, oh, okay, so maybe, I don't know. Maybe death is less scary than we all think. But is it more scary? Is it something to be feared? Is it something to embrace? Who knows? In Bruges doesn't. But I just like the fact that I was just as you were saying there, sorry, it does kind of feel like this could be him having this conversation before he kills himself. Like this could be a retelling of a story.
Like a confessional.
Yeah.
It's a confessional to another priest.
There we go. One that he doesn't shoot and then end up killing a child.
Well, maybe he does. It's just destined to repeat himself over and over again.
It's a loop. It's just a constant loop of...
Which is purgatory.
Exactly.
Just to be destined to repeat yourself and your actions over and over again and never be able to break that cycle would definitely be his kind of purgatory.
I think so.
In Bruges.
In Bruges. It's a fairy tale city.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think... For a film, like, the plot could, like... Because we talked about this, when it came out in 2008, it was, like, kind of thrown in there with, like, throwaway comedies. Like, The Hangover is, like, this, like, madly funny thing about two hitmen. I'm like, that's such a disservice to this film. It's, like, so much more nuance than that. I really feel like the writing in it is so lovely. And, like, the characterization is just so good. And, like, they're flawed. And, like... Humans are supposed to be flawed and like there's no final answer because none of us will actually get a final answer because we don't know. So I think this is the first time we've officially had a film one of us has never seen before.
No, I've had a couple. I hadn't seen Heather's. Oh, I think I might have seen Heather's, but I'd forgotten most of it. I clearly only half paid attention. I was young.
You would have been very young.
This is quite possibly the first one I've properly not seen.
So how was it as a going in cold as a viewer?
Do you know what? I wish part of me wishes I hadn't seen Banshees of Inisherin.
Okay.
Because it would have been quite fresh to me.
Yeah.
What was interesting for me was that it felt like an echo.
Yeah.
Which it is. I mean, the two films echo each other.
I think so.
Thematically, structurally, narratively, character-wise. I mean, they definitely feel like they belong together. And I would happily rewatch both. Maybe a little bit more depressed watching Banshees of Inisherin than I was watching this for slightly different reasons. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a revelation. I mean, Colin Farrell's as an actor I sometimes dismiss.
Yes, same.
And he's very good in this. Brendan Gleeson I knew had the goods. it made me want to go to Bruges.
Yeah.
To be honest.
It does.
It's a great advert for the city.
I will tell you.
Nothing, Harry.
It's a fairy tale fucking town, isn't it? How can a fairy tale town not be somebody's fucking thing?
So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm see, I do pick things because they're good, not just because I'm hate Die Hard.
It's a goddamn Bruce Willis movie.
Anyway, thank you for joining us for this discussion today, and thank you for your support. If you're a member, you have completely made our whole year because you've kept us going. And by being a member and paying just that £3 a month for your ticket to come and see films, you support us and Accidental and Cinepunct, and it just really helps us keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. So your input is always needed. We've got some new exciting changes coming to the Never Seen It Film Club that we'll be announcing in January. So keep your eyes peeled on the Discord channel for that. You can follow us at Accidental Theatre on most things. Accidental T on the not thing that we're not using because of reasons. But at Accidental Theatre on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a TikTok now because we're young and hip and down with the kids. And you can follow Robert and Cinepunct at...
You'll get me at Avalard, that's Avalard, on most platforms. You will find me also under my actual name. Cinepunct is Cinepunct on most platforms except for Instagram, where we are Cinepunct Film. And also our website, cinepunct.com.
Lovely. And we will see you in the new year. And in the meantime, have a lovely Christmas, a happy new year, and take it easy, you filthy animals.
Harry,
What?
it's an inanimate fucking object.
You're an inanimate fucking object!
Hey guys, thanks for watching. My name's Emma from Accidental Theatre. This is Robert J. Simpson from Cinepunct, and we run Never Seen It Film Club, the film club where we watch films that you've never seen. We'd really appreciate it if you could come and join in to our membership programme, where you can come and see a lovely film in our beautiful book bar every month, and it costs just £3 a month, and it's amazing. The membership button should be right about here, so if you're just there. And if you can't join the membership, that's no problem, just like and subscribe to the channel.